In a time in which uncertainty can plague our mind and fog our judgment, a remedy starts to sound real good. After a pandemic, political uncertainty, economic unpredictability, and many other global worries, finding a way to cope with the anxiety of everyday life becomes essential. So how can Stoicism, an ancient philosophical system of understanding, aid us in our journey towards calm after the storm? Anxiety itself is rooted in many things. Perhaps the pandemic has dug up some aspects of life we cannot avoid, like death or illness. Or perhaps we feel anxiety because we've not been able to do things we intended to do this year. Whether this anxiety manifests itself into something big or small, both can be equally destructive, ruining our perspective on life and spiraling us out of control. Anxiety can ruin the time we have with ourselves, an anxiety that is primarily driven by thoughts that are mainly out of our control. But the real question is how to deal with these anxieties, and how can Stoicism help us on our journey? By applying Stoicism into our daily life, we start to prioritize self-improvement. In particular, Seneca, a 1st century Roman philosopher, examined the ins and outs of anxious feelings in his Letters from a Stoic that can help us on our journey towards calm and more tranquil peace of mind in this time of chaos. There are more things likely to frighten us than there are to crush us. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality, Seneca sums up. We often imagine the worst inside our mind and begin to spiral and create an even worse situation than before. The main tenet in Stoicism is focused on controlling irrational emotions, the emotions in which we control, the judgments we dictate, and altering our perspective upon that situation. This works with anxiety. During this pandemic, drawing on the toxic thoughts of the virus or restrictions brought us nothing but harm. Understanding you can change your point of view has the power to bring us balance. Instead of focusing on the worst, look for potential, evaluate what you can gain from this situation. Perhaps we learn to appreciate the time we're being given to grow, embrace the freedom that we're slowly given. Another important one of Seneca's teachings is to take an expanded view, looking beyond the perspective of ourselves and considering the generations that have shared the same experience as us. By viewing life from this perspective, we start to appreciate the circumstance we're in rather than resenting it. This is especially significant during this time when we can sometimes feel like the only ones to fall victim to this terrible disaster, when in reality, almost everyone can relate. We know Seneca's thoughts on the situation. But what about Aurelius? Aurelius himself faced a terrifying disease and other major threats during his time in power. Again, a technique that marked itself as significant was distinguishing what is and what isn't in our control. And what we can control, he explains that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This is the power Aurelius embraced: resilience, emotional resilience. Sometimes we have to accept that our plans or expectations may be tainted, that the idea we had in our head may not pan out perfectly. However, despite this, we have the potential to focus our energy upon the things we do have the power to adapt. Alongside the principles of control, Aurelius advocated for a schedule, setting yourself goals for the day ahead. Whether this goal is as simple as making your bed, a simple sense of regularity can offer us a window of calm, observing our feelings, giving us responsibility, and so on. We learn to focus on these tasks and ultimately avoid irrational feelings, learning to step back from the irrelevant emotional energy that could be detrimental to our well-being. By making the most of the present moment, we tend to combat that feeling of catastrophe. Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens, Epictetus argues. Resilience, above all, has become desired by many. People turn to Stoicism to look for this resilience during the entirety of this pandemic. This resilience is often found when we come to the realization that everything we need to cope is already in our hands. Don't let the future worry you. You will meet it, if you have to, with reason. The same resource you use now to deal with life, Aurelius reassures. What's the point of fighting with the future? Fighting with what you don't have. All that does is guarantee anger. We will always have the internal response mechanisms to cope with the reality that comes our way. Today I escaped anxiety, or no, I discarded it, because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside, Aurelius summarizes. Throughout this experience of the pandemic, adversity has welcomed us. Hopefully the Stoic approach of thinking has helped us in our journey towards a change in perspectives. A change in perspective that ultimately has the power to influence real progress in our lives.
you.